Welcome to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement, where we make procurement rock and roll. I'm Natasha, founder and CEO of Candid Procurement, formerly CPO of Nike. With me is Zach Bashir, my consultant to go to with any questions and problems of procurement nature I may have, and Conrad Smith, founder and CEO of Graphite, founder, CPO of Adobe, my friend and colleague for 15 years. Between the three of us, we bring to you about 71 years of joint procurement experience. And today we're going to be talking about the S word, the swearing word of procurement called savings, or rather how we generate value. We all procurement professionals were in the position when, as that proverbial 2:00 in the morning call comes, and in our world, it's the call from the CFO that says, the quarter is bad, or a year is bad, or tariffs are bad, or COVID struck. How we generate savings? I need your team to deliver X million of value. And we procurement professionals, we can wear different hats and we can adopt different behavioral modes. We can become a cost police, and we're going to start squeezing suppliers on the margin. Even saying that gives me chills. Or we're going to start pressing the stakeholders, cutting the budgets, and really not approaching the business in a effective and efficient way. Or we can start framing up relationships as strategic partners and deep thinkers and innovators and creators of how do we help the business to get where the business needed to be. So we're going to have this conversation today about practical steps. How do we bring the value, bring the savings, how we think about it. And I am sure that, as in previous episodes related to the contracts or to negotiation, we'll realize that it will require more than one episode. So stay tuned for more information. But today, let's focus on the overall approach. Zach, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you and get your thinking on when the client calls, what kind of preparation, thought process, thinking your team is going through to address the client need to generate savings?
Definitely the driver. So what is the driver? Like you said, Natasha, it's usually a bad quarter or a bad year or some kind of upcoming M&A. Or if it's a private equity owned business, it's about improving the financial performance of the company and they want to understand how to do that. So it's very important for us as consultants. And I know this isn't about how consultants do things, but definitely understand what the objective is. I think the same would apply for a CPO or head of procurement. They need to understand the real driver. The reason that's really important is because it's not even just enough to understand the driver. You need to understand how much license you have to push for cost cutting, right? And for reducing costs and getting better value. The reason I say this is because if it is a real financial challenge, let's say a business is in like a turnaround situation where they really do need to shave dollars off the bottom line, then that's one mandate versus, we want to improve financial performance, generally speaking, where maybe we can be, we're focused more on value, not just real hard numbers, but maybe something getting more value for the money that we're putting in. So is it a real budget challenge? Is it really about trimming the numbers, about the numbers, or is it about how much value we're driving out of our current procurement processes? And I think that's the reason that's really interesting as well, is because when it comes to executing a cost reduction program, and we've all done this many times, it can be very painful, like you alluded to, Natasha, with stakeholders, with your suppliers. But sometimes, I think you said it gives you a chill down your spine when you have to go and bang the desk on a supplier or whatever. I completely concur and I agree. But sometimes that's necessary. There are situations where the business is struggling so much that actually you just need to go and get that cash, however way that you can, right? So it doesn't become about long-term relationship and long-term value, but it's about right now, just survival, right? So I think understanding the context is super important. Probably that would be my first step, really dive into what is driving this program.
And do you think there is a way to get ahead of it? Like, what can be procurement approach, or what kind of ongoing processes, checkpoints, touch bases can procurement implement so to be more prepared for it, so it wouldn't be like we need it tomorrow? Because all of us procurement professionals know that very little can be delivered tomorrow, that everything takes time.
Yeah. But can you imagine, Natasha, let's say you're doing an amazing job as a CPO and your costs are as low as they can be and your values as high as it can be. And you still get that call from the CFO being like, hey, I need to trim costs. It's very difficult to turn around and say, well, we've already trimmed all the costs we possibly can. And maybe that is the right answer sometimes. But invariably, when there's a challenge like this, you're expected to somehow find some savings, right? So in terms of preparation for it, I'd say getting the basics right, as we've talked about before. So make sure you understand which contracts you've got. Okay, if you're not negotiating every renewal at the moment, fine. Okay, but at least have a view of what renewals haven't been negotiated in a long time. So keep track of that. Keep track of your spend. What's your spend under management? What parts of the business have you not influenced yet as well as you could? And maybe it's a chance for you to ask the CFO as well that I want to extend my reach because actually I can't find enough savings in this bucket. And I know you told me not to touch this bucket, but that bucket I know I can get value from and drive value from, right? We are commercial people, we're procurement people, so we can definitely do that in almost any department. So in terms of preparation, I'd say, yeah, make sure you've got good spend data ready to go. So if you're asked to start a cost reduction program, you've got spend data that you can pull very quickly, and it's not going to take you 2 weeks for finance to turn it around or something like that. Make sure that you have access to all your contracts and your documents. Again, if you don't have that ready, you're going to spend the first month looking for contracts and documents and stuff, And also network in the business. Make sure you've got good relationships ready to go so that when you get that call from the CFO, you can go and have those conversations with the stakeholders without upsetting people too much, right? Because you've got a relationship and you've got something going for you at that point. If you go in cold to a stakeholder you've never met before and been like, I got a mandate to, cut your budget, that's going to give you a very bad time when it actually comes to delivering it. From a supplier point of view, I think it's also important to stay engaged. I think suppliers often expect procurement or the business to go back and ask for savings. So how do you prepare for that side of things? I guess just be nice to your suppliers so that when times get tough, you can be a little bit less nice.
Just leave a little meat on the bone. Is that what you're saying? Just leave a little bit to come back later?
Leave a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
What strikes...
Well, I want to add that this point of be nice to your supplier is actually the thread that is coming through all our episodes. So I think that there's not a single episode when we did not strike the chord that be nice to your suppliers. So Conrad, I like to get your perspective. What Zach have outlined on have a spend data, have access to contracts, network with your stakeholders, kind of keep your hand on the pulse. Those were the right focus areas 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and today. What has changed, though, is the speed with which savings can be generated because a lot of systems and tools and kind of like very helpful technological crutches became available for procurement professionals. What is your guidance as a tech expert on what can and how be integrated into today's environment to assist procurement teams when they need to react quickly?
That's a great question. As you and Zach have been talking, I've been thinking about my own experience and friends I have that today, right now, have moved into procurement roles of different levels of maturity of their organization, their culture, what they're like, where they're sitting, right? I mean, your question, Natasha, I thought was brilliant. And I'd love to hear your answer to that question, right? Like, what do you do in advance? So I'm going to pose that back to you in a second. But like sometimes we get into a situation where we're in an organization with a very immature team and process around us, and it's tactical, right? Somebody's calling every Friday saying this contract is expiring when we didn't even know the contract existed. And so, what Zach's describing, like make sure you have all that stuff, that may be like a 6 to 12 month project for you, depending on where you are in your process to getting your stuff together as a leader and getting the process and like all of that stuff. Or you may be running, you may be in a very mature organization where at your fingertips today, right now, you could like turn around within an hour or two and have a really clear vision of your spend, where your contracts are, and you know what you would do next. Like that continuum is really important to think about, because practically, like not everybody is sitting on, they're ready to respond in 5 minutes. And, for me, the question is, how do you get ready? It's like what we should be doing as procurement leaders anyway is figuring out how to be strategic. Like whether the CFO gives you a mandate and a demand or not, I think internally we should be doing all of these same things, unless I would never accuse anyone of being lazy, but there's so much happening every day. Sometimes we just don't invest that extra 5 or 10% to like, yes, I have to work more hours because I have to invest to get to the strategic thing. The tactical's killing me, but I have to keep like nudging my way up the maturity. But you asked about technology. There's tons of tools and technology that can be brought to bear. But again, I think that's going to depend on where you are in this maturity cycle and what your priorities are. Do I have spend data? Do I know how to extract data from, the payment, the ERP or the payment system? Do I have a data warehouse? Do I even know who my suppliers are? Do I have a CLM? All of those things are really super relevant to the big strategic picture. And we have more help than we've ever had before, even with AI. I mean, I can imagine taking this thing like, oh my gosh, I really don't know any of this stuff, and analyzing spend information with AI today as to being, so much easier than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. But anyway, what would you say, Natasha, in terms of the most important kind of building blocks to have in place to feel prepared for that call when the CFO calls?
Proactivity for me is the main thing. And whenever I join new organization or whenever I get a new client, first thing first, follow the money. And once you start follow the money, you know where the company spends money, with who, and for what. Even for what is the secondary question, but the top 3, how much, with who, and who is the buyer. And sometimes when the company spends a lot of money, it's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just it. And you have to work with that information. Once you build proactive understanding where the money goes to and who is the buyer, you start understanding the nature of companies' buying pattern and companies selecting providers. And I think we shared in one of our earlier episodes, I shared a conversation with one very progressive, very procurement-friendly CMO who I had conversation with, asking how many agencies they think they have. And the answer was too many. And I double-clicked and I said, how many is too many? And the answer that was given to me was 400. And I said, you have 3,900. And it's sometimes just not known to people. So I believe in the goodness of procurement people. And I know that delivering value to the company in a very odd way, we're driven by it, right? That's in our DNA. We get jazzed when we can bring value to the company, even though it doesn't impact our personal financial being or compensation. So I think the procurement is sincerely always looking for opportunities to drive value. And even if the call comes at 2 o'clock in the morning and says you have to drive something, I am sure that majority of procurement people can answer, tell the CFO, we can, but you need to know what you need to drive that value. Do you need more resources? Do you need more internal or external resources? Do you need more tech support? Do you need a mandate from the company to merge procurement and shadow procurement organizations? So it's kind of like if you are a proactive thinker and you know where the money goes, who the money goes to, and who initiates the business, then you always know what are additional sources of value, and you know what you need to drive that value.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm a believer that there is a long pipeline of projects that procurement would love to deliver for the company, but it didn't because it didn't have either the right buy-in or something is a sacred cow or procurement wasn't given enough resources.
Yeah, I was going to say, Natasha, your point around like the excitement from delivering value and savings, that resonates with me so much because one of my favorite things, because it's numbers, is dealing with hard numbers. It feels like the value deliver is really there. So that's why I think a lot of procurement folk probably gravitate to that kind of mindset because they're like savings. I can put 100,000 here. I can write the number. I can put 1 million here on the table versus delivering more transformational type procurement stuff, which delivers value, but it's much harder to measure that value, right? And equally, it also takes us down this rabbit hole, which I don't think we'll get into today, around savings definitions and what actually is a saving. But that's also part of it. So when you're thinking about saving money, the CFO is thinking about cash, right? He's thinking about cash in the bank. And that's not always where you start or where the opportunities are. And bringing that cash forward can be quite difficult sometimes as well. Yeah.
I remember, Zach, in the first year of working in procurement, I'm in my 20s and I did something on a contract and it was a just ask. It wasn't even like a super strategic thing. It was just like, hey, we need a better discount here. And they were like, okay. And they gave the discount and it was, I don't know, 20, 30, 50s. I don't even remember, but it was tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, over time, we all worked with hundreds of millions of dollars, but it just blew my mind. And I went home, I'm like, honey, the company would have like spent, let's just say $25,000 more today if I hadn't done that. Like it just would have gone out the door. And it does feel very rewarding.
I think I reckon that experience kind of is probably more common than you and me. Because I've had that same exact experience. I've had it on the sales side. Before I really knew what procurement was, I had a sales job. And I remember I got a call one day. I was a desk selling software and the call was asking for a 10% discount. And I was a junior guy, so I had to call up my manager and my boss, say, they want 10%. He's like, okay, I give him 10. And like you said, it was something like 10K or 20K's worth. And at the end of that call, I just couldn't help but think, who is this person who called me and within 5 minutes gets a 10,000 pound saving, right? And why did we give them that saving just for asking for it? So definitely app. I think, yeah, there are all kinds of little, things like that help you get money on the table.
So sorry, it just struck such a memory for me, but I loved what Natasha said because, and this kind of goes back to the, are you tactical or are you strategic thing that I was trying to say before, which is you probably, as you're more towards strategic, you probably know what you want to do even before the CFO calls. And then if you do what you said and okay, are you trying to put, like you have to have money dropping to the bottom line in this quarter to do this thing or something else happening? And these calls are really, really interesting, right? When I was at Intel in the early days, the call was really weird, which is, IBM is pooping all over Intel because of the floating point error. We're not going to buy anything else from IBM. Stop the laptop, stop the server, stop the this, stop the that. I mean, it's almost like a tariff issue or a COVID issue more than just go get money to the bottom line. But that totally like puts everything else to the side of the table. You pull up your chair and say, okay, this is what we're trying to do. We've now got to figure out how to get servers and laptops and, whatever it is from another source and understanding what's really critical to business, the step one. And then the step two that Natasha's talking about is, okay, what's the top of the Pareto? What are the top 3 things we go do? And you might already know what those are, right? Hopefully you do, because you've been trying to work on them. I really love that.
Yeah. And so would you focus on demand or supply to start with? Because I think they're both very different buckets of levers, right? Or lever types. I don't know, like Natasha, what's better to save money in your view? Is it cut the demand, reduce the internal demand, or reduce the supplier's price? And demand would cover things like specifications as well, right? So anything that's driven by the business.
I think before you cut the demand and you cut and you squeeze suppliers, I think you need to identify redundancies. And it almost like no difference if the organization is large or small. Redundancies always exist because speed to market very often drives and dictates buyers' behavior. And as a result, you always is a big word, but more often than not, you have the redundant services or redundant suppliers. And if you eliminate that can actually drive the value. But I think that's the reason why it's very important for procurement to have this vision and a roster of projects that they would love to do, so that when the right time comes, they don't have to think twice, and they have a message to the CPO like, cut this before you start cutting people. And I think this may be a hairy subject related to cutting people, because that is not in procurement purview, thankfully. But I think that we do play a role in proactive communication with executive leadership on making it known in advance what areas of effectiveness and efficiency company is bypassing, and just make it known before organizationally the decision is made to start cutting workforce. So I think that we can contribute to preventing some of these drastic events that companies go through in an effort of cutting costs.
Sorry, I'm not sure I totally understand. Are you saying that as procurement has visibility across the organization, then we can help leadership see where they should be looking for more efficiency in headcount or spending anyway, just kind of as arm in arm with FP&A, or like, how do you see that taking place?
So I think that us proactively communicating on where the sources of value are that the businesses are not pursuing, can potentially save some workforce. So the companies would go to save the money from the business activities before they start touching workforce. This is just me expanding on Zach's answer on, do we go after suppliers first or cutting demand? And I'm saying before we do that, we identify redundancies, bring them to the attention of the leadership, and maybe by doing that, proactively highlighting the areas where savings can be generated, we can protect potential workforce cuts.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's low-hanging fruit in redundancy, like you said, Natasha. Like the first thing you should do is look at get the spend data, make sure it's categorized. So you got a taxonomy, right? And make sure that for every category, like you said, Natasha, you rank your highest spend supplier to your lowest spend, very basic stuff. And then who the stakeholder is, who's buying and how much they've spent money on. And it's almost like working your way per category, supplier by supplier, from top to bottom, to understand where the money and the value is being left. But definitely the easiest lever is to turn around and say, we're buying this thing. It's not super important to the stakeholder. We've been paying on it for 3 years. We could just stop it like today. We could, just terminate that subscription, or, cancel that contract, don't renew it, etc. Get it out of the auto renewal. But then as you move further and further up through the spend data, then your levers are going to have to get more complicated. So the next easy lever might be, okay, this group of suppliers, we're going to we haven't negotiated before the contracts, so we're going to go and ask for 5-10% discount, for example, right? Just see where that lands us. I gave you an example where that worked on me once, so it would work invariably with some other suppliers, maybe non-strategic suppliers, etc. But then you got to move further up the chain. It gets a bit harder and harder. So maybe later on, you're then looking at, okay, what are we buying and what is this exact specification? And do we need this exact specification? And then it becomes a bit more complicated. Or it could be, we need to change the whole operating model of how we do things in order to save really big money, big cash. As a business, we need to reorganize our supply chain services, or, we need to change the operating model around something to really drive big value. And I think that's where I get a lot of the challenge from delivering savings. It's the balance between quick, tactical, a little bit rough, trying to get cash through the door, versus the more transformational, more involved changes that deliver long-term sustainable savings. And those are two completely different sides of the spectrum.
So you mentioned low-hanging fruits / quick hits. Organizationally, companies, like when they need to cut the cost across the organization, they would say nobody travels Q3, Q4. This is like Q3 coming and you know what to expect, right? You mentioned something like canceling subscriptions or consolidating some subscriptions. Conrad and Zach, you both, what else do you guys see as low-hanging fruits or quick hits? Something that would not disrupt organizational performance and delivering to the key business objectives, but something in a very practical terms that can generate reduction.
But, I hadn't even thought about redundancies when we got into this conversation, which is silly, but I maybe another word for that is waste. But like, as you start to get to things that I've seen, like, okay, we're delaying laptop refreshes. We're not replacing mobile phones. There's a number of things that are sort of in this discretionary, call it expense budget, that maybe even procurement doesn't have policy or mandate or purview to, but we kind of recognize inside the spend which of these things are on dials like you're talking about, that you can just kind of turn the dial and say, we're going to stop the 3-year laptop refresh. For now, it's going to be 4 years or whatever. I don't know. So I just kind of think I would want to know in advance, and I would want to, if I didn't have it in advance, I would want to know right away, sort of this ranking of the spend and the suppliers and the categories Zach's talking about. Which of these things are targets for those kind of dial activities? Like they're consumption based in such a way that you can modify the consumption with, maybe without too much pain. So those to kind of the tactical, just ask sort of things, to the very strategic transformational things that Zach's talking about. But yeah, I don't know. We've all lived through the don't travel, don't hire, like all the freezes. We've all lived through those things. I don't know how super effective they are. They obviously drive a few percent to the bottom line for a business. I don't know that I don't know if that's the scope that has to be delivered in that moment.
And I don't think there's anything wrong on encroaching, by the way. So I think one theme of delivering savings value, I think generally, is you need a great relationship with finance. Okay. If you're doing the cost reduction program, it becomes even more important. Okay. There's nothing at all wrong. And I've had no issues with this. Getting, for example, and we talked about spending suppliers, but you might also get from finance, the capital budget, for example, and what projects they plan on spending money on over the next 12 months, 24 months. And oftentimes these are business decisions, but we in procurement, we've always talking about how we need to be in the business. And as commercial people with commercial hats on, it is totally within our capability to point at something like that and say, you know what, you should be prioritizing this initiative, or you should break up this one into these 3 parts, or, this one you should defer. Like, we should have an involvement in those kinds of business-wide decisions, which includes things like travel bans. More often than not, I find procurement own the travel policy, for example, and then the travel provider. So I think that finance relationship is super important. The understanding of what finance is trying to achieve in terms of, like I said at the beginning, bringing cash in or, deferring P&L expenses, or reducing their capex. They want a more efficient balance sheet or whatever it is. Very important to understand that. And I think for a lot of listeners as well, don't shy away from terms like that. They sound scary and like, oh, what's finance talking about when they talk about capital expenditure and, asset efficiency? And a quick ChatGPT or Google will show you like it's very basic concepts here. And we should be comfortable having that kind of conversation. I'd go so far as to say procurement should be training their people on basic finance literacy, corporate finance literacy. It's a very, very valuable skill set, both internally, also with your suppliers. Because if you start looking at your suppliers, if they're a public company and you can see their financials and how they're doing, that gives you more leverage for your discussions with them or whatever it may be.
I can't imagine doing this without finance. That would be nuts. I know we're running short on time. I want to put one other thing that just puts a pit in my stomach about this whole project, and that is a lot of the big spend, a lot of material spend has a contract that was negotiated and signed. And when I think about having, like, even personally participating in some of those deals, and then knowing that now I have to go back to the table and saying, sorry guys, we have to renegotiate this. Like, it just, I don't think it's not ethical, but it just feels really weird to me and really uncomfortable. Like, how do you get past the, okay, we're going to open up something that we signed or that we agreed in the past? And what are the, what's the mindset? What's the approach? How do you do that effectively?
I'll take this one first, and then Natasha, maybe you want to take it after. But I don't see it the same way as you do, Conrad, because I think it is about how you communicate it. So if I do need to reopen a contract that's been signed already and that's delivering acceptably, I think you approach the supplier with that message of, hey, we're really struggling. We need to find cost savings, right? And so are you open to reopening the contract? Now, some of them might say, you know what? Yeah, we can look at what we can do to help you reduce the amount you're spending. Some of them might say, actually, no. And they might say, well, actually, no, like, this is a contract set in stone. You need to pay us whatever's in the contract, etc. In which case, and then you can get a little bit deeper into the contract, get into the detail of the contract and start saying, well, are you actually delivering everything that's in the contract to find those opportunities? But start from that transparency position, right? Don't go in there with, oh, we need to open up the contract and we're looking to cut the saving. Just be open about it. There's a cost challenge and you need them to come to the table. They might come to the table with something that surprises you, something that's different from what you expected to get by reopening that contract. I don't know, Natasha, what's your view on contracts that are signed and done?
I believe that that if there is a good reason to reopen the contract, that it should be, if it has to be done, it can be done. I am not, but it should be very rare and really heavily justified. Now, as I am supporting various clients, I can actually see many instances when contracts that are put in place are majorly disadvantageous to the enterprises, because they were put in place either in a hurry or they were negotiated by people who were very smart, had great intentions, but did not have negotiation skills or did not study market well. And if I see something that hurts enterprise and will continue hurting for the next 3 years, I think that the contract should be reopened. But do I like it as a procurement professional or do I like it as a third-party provider? No. But I also think responsibility is on the provider to make sure that even if they see in front of them inexperienced negotiator, not to take full advantage of that situation, because an experienced one can come after it and will create the situation when you have to reopen the contract. So not a supporter of it, but I've done it a couple of times, and not purely for the cost savings, but if I see that the balance of power is just very unevenly distributed and it's just not a fair deal or it like really hurts enterprise. I also want to add to your point about finance because it was very important aspect of relationships that procurement has. It has to be iron, right? Like it has to be like solid, very, very solid relationships between procurement and finance. The best impact to the enterprise that I've experienced in my career is that when finance presented procurement, that savings generated by procurement. Because when it's FP&A or finance operations presents, FP&A usually presents savings numbers generated by procurement and generated by business to the CFO knows that numbers are bulletproof. There's very little doubt and very little room to say, well, you're talking about these big savings numbers, but I don't see it. But we don't like, where are they? But the P&L didn't go down. The cash flow did not have positive impact. Like we don't have this or that. When finance presents your numbers, it's a very different conversation. It's different level of trust, of validation, of credibility of the numbers. And I would like to underline, highlight, bold, and make it in italics what you said about the importance of procurement and finance have very, very, very close tie.
Yeah. And also like invest in the literacy and your own financial understanding of how, because it's FP&A do it, but equally procurement can, if you understand a little bit of finance, you'll go that much further with FP&A. Let's put it that way. Right.
Yeah. Can I set the stage for the next episode that, as we suspected, we were not going to cover it all in this one conversation? I think that cost avoidance had historically somehow earned a bad name. And as a procurement professional, I understand the importance of that cost avoidance, but I am yet to figure out the formula how to effectively deliver the news to the CFOs that if you don't appreciate cost avoidance today, your margins will suffer tomorrow. And can we talk about it next time? Can we talk about the difference between reduction, avoidance, cash savings, and who is the favorite child and who is a stepchild? Do you think it would be beneficial for our listeners?
Absolutely. I think it definitely very beneficial. Could be a bit of a rabbit hole as well, but we'll find out, I guess.
No, I think it's going to be an excellent conversation. I mean, spoiler alert, there's not an answer at the end of it, right? There's just a lot of sharing and knowledge and insights to help with the conversation. But yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a really good conversation. And it ties back to the CFO thing, right? Because the CFO wants the money and they have something in their head. So I think that's a really good next episode. Looking forward to that conversation.
Absolutely. Well, let's summarize quickly what we learned today, right? So we spoke about having a view and perspective in advance and have a proactive thinking of where the value can be coming from, and have spend data contracts in advance, or at least know where they're coming from, and try to set time aside to analyze them proactively. Cornerstone is close connection to the business and networking with your stakeholders on ongoing basis. Have a list of low-hanging fruits and quick hits that when that call at 2 a.m. proverbial come, you know where to go, how to act, because we know that it's not if the call will come, it's just always when the call comes. And we finished with relationships with finance and necessity for procurement professionals have a solid knowledge of financial basics. And Zach suggested using, Google, Perplexity, ChatGPT. I would like to add to that ask your finance partners to walk you through the concept of the cash flow or concept of capital expenditures, they will be thrilled. It will be one of the aspects of building close tie and connection with your finance partners if they know that you're interested in their world. Well, as always, thank you guys for sharing with our audience practical tips and tricks. And I hope that we made a dent in this monolith of cold savings, and to be continued.
Hey, just before we wrap, what you just said prompted something. I've got to share it. In my business today, in a lot of places in business, we do a desktop drill. Like if this happened tomorrow, what would we do? Why don't we do that with this? Like, pretend right now today that the call is going to come from this CFO. Like, are you ready? Go back to your teams and have a desktop drill. What's in place? What would you do? How would you approach it? Sorry, I just had to say that because it's going to come, and to be proactive, you've got to think through it in advance. Sorry. To be continued, right? But
do not apologize. That's a perfect wrap. The call will come. Desktop drill. Be prepared.
Love it.
Thank you. We'll talk to you. See you soon.
Take care.
Thanks,